Welcome to Wedding Pro Weekly. I'm Jason Groh. Our guest this week is photographer Robb Davidson of Robb Davidson Photography. In our interview, we talked about his story, why throwing cameras in the air is a good thing, and his opinion on how brides should pick their photographer. And now, on with the podcast. Welcome back to Wedding Pro Weekly. I am here with photographer Robb Davidson. Robb, how are you today, sir?
Good. How you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for joining us. So,
thanks for having me.
Wedding Pro Weekly, we like to learn about your story. This is all about your background and how you kind of came into this industry. And this is for wedding professionals and also for bride and grooms. So we'll cover both those topics. But let's just get started with your story. I mean, how did you, what got you into photography?
It actually, it kind of fell into my lap. I was in college, had a point-and-shoot camera. I wasn't one of those guys that, I grew up taking pictures my whole life and I had a passion, whatever. That's a bunch of garbage. I was in college and it got stolen from me, this little dinky camera. And I figured, well, I'm going to go replace it, go to Best Buy, and kind of have the mentality of go big or go home. So I bought an SLR thinking I'd take better pictures like anyone else out there thinks now. Realized quickly that's not the case. But I had to learn kind of just how to use it and look online, kind of how to use a camera, the settings, all that crap. Took pictures of friends, posted it online. The college saw it, and they're like, hey, want to shoot an event for us? We'll pay $50. And then just kind of grew from there. Or I did brochure work for them. Then I shot a buddy's wedding. He paid me $500, and I rented a ton of gear. I probably went in the negative from all the gear I rented, but it was so much fun. And from there, I was like, this is freaking cool. And, being a painful extrovert, being around tons of people and just partying the whole time, like, yeah, I can get on board with that. So once I graduated college, I kept shooting, but I knew I had to grow up and get a 9-to-5 job. And so at the time, I was at the Wheaton Sports Center doing facilities and fitness floor while I could just get a 9-to-5 job. But then I couldn't make any interviews because I was shooting the whole time. So I kind of just took less hours at the gym, stopped bothering doing any interviews and stuff like that. And then eventually I couldn't even do 10 hours a week at the gym. I just went full time, probably 2011. In the business for photography. Never once did I think it'd be a business, I need to start my business. It was just, I like taking pictures. I love hanging out with people and just being nuts. And it just kind of kept going.
So, and you made a good point. I mean, I think some people think, and especially I think as of late with SLRs and DSLRs and these cameras, that people think they can just pick up a camera and get into the business. Mm-hmm. And I think, do you think that there's some truth to that, or do you think you need to have some sort of apprenticeship? How did you? Because it's hard to go. Couples who work with photographers, they don't necessarily want to work with somebody who, this is their first time doing it. Because
right.
So, did you consider an apprenticeship? Did you seek out somebody to kind of work with, or how did that sort of come about?
I pretty much did on my own, but every person that I took pictures of, they knew what they were getting themselves into if I was a newbie. And if you charge them $50 for a senior portrait, you're not going to get a work of art. Some of those people I kind of went on right back and apologize and hey, my bad. I thought it was cool to do this, and it's so painful to look back at it and be like, oh, I thought that was great at one point.
Did you have stare out the window?
Oh my gosh! Oh, you name it. Silhouettes were the coolest thing ever. No one else thought of silhouettes but me, of course. So, just stuff like that where I had to humble myself a little bit to know where I was. And I think I learn more on my own because with my brain, at least, when I'm with someone else that's an expert, my brain just turns into order-taking mode instead of creative outside-the-box thinking. So when I'm on my own, I'm still in my own space and kind of figuring out how to make it work. And more just not looking for the right setting, okay, what's the right settings to put for right here? It's how do I capture this entire scene or the person, the personality, or the location, whatever the case may be. So you're thinking a little bit bigger picture. And I've had people approach me too to kind of do the same thing where they wanted to learn from me and shadow me on shoots. I'm like, that's probably one of the hardest things to do because, you probably know too, you're in go mode. They're the last person I'm going to think about. I'm not going to tell them how I got whatever. Not to keep them from information, but just someone paid me money to do a good job. I'm going to do it and not waste their time by waiting for my little lackey to come along and figure out what exactly was going on. By the time I got 20 pictures, they finally got their settings right to get maybe one picture. Hopefully it went in focus. So that's kind of the feeling I had when I was starting out. I didn't want to be a burden to anybody.
Yeah, and nobody wants to have somebody, at least I don't think anybody wants someone training somebody on their on their big day.
Right.
Hey, can you come over here? Here, let me show you the setting for
Right.
this. I mean, that's not maybe the best environment to do that. But at the same time, I would imagine that, I mean, you had to. I mean, do you look at did you have like maybe some people that you were looking at that kind of, because you pick it up and say, okay, well, this looks good, or I just think that looks good, or did you actually, because other like presidents will read historians, will read books written by historians on other presidents. Artists will look at other artists. I mean, were there other photographers that you looked at and saying, hey, you know what, that's pretty cool, I appreciate that, or hey, did you look for reference like in certain areas, or you just sort of figure it out by yourself?
Yeah, a little bit. I noticed that I was very, again, like order taking. When I looked at someone's stuff, when I was quote unquote inspired, honestly, I was just trying to replicate it. Like I didn't want to go like with how did they get that and how can I apply it to what I'm doing. It was just how can I get that shot. So I put more effort and energy into just replicating than I was to like learn the actual skill. At least for me, and everyone learns different, as I come to realize. So the moment I stopped really trying to like get quote unquote inspiration is when I did my own thing, and it made more sense because like the way I do things with like my personality and how I kind of try to get people chill and have fun with them or whatever is something you really don't see in pictures a whole lot. Hopefully, I mean, really, it should just be who they are, and it's hard to tell by just looking at the picture. And I learned that later on when I stopped trying to copy people.
That's a good point. I mean, at some point, do you think that a lot of this is based on the personality of the photographer, less the photo itself, the experience that the couple has?
I totally think so, and that's why some couples, when we meet and talk about their wedding or something like that, sometimes I just don't think I'm the right guy for them because it's 10, 12 hours out of the day. That's the most intimate time of their lives, and if I'm out of my mind, insane, jumping in trees and stuff like that, and they're really nice, sweet, polite, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if they're gonna be uncomfortable all day and like just kind of try to handle my personality, like I don't want to put people in that position, and then vice versa. Maybe there's crazier people than I am.
Well, it's true, and you guys are so hands-on too. I mean, I know that at least one of the things I think that we try to do on our end, in the video side, is that we really try to work a little bit more in the background, not get into the real stagey stuff. So. But with you, I mean, you are, and I tell our couples, like, hey, your photographer's going to be working with you. Your photographer is going to be working with you one-on-one throughout the day. So you have so much that you have to do with them and so much interaction with them. We're working more in the background, right? That personality really, I would imagine, does play such a big part.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's tough, too, because every photographer always says they're a journalist or, I know, right? It's like, yeah, you definitely want to tell the story, but we know at this point things don't happen as natural or as pretty as like people see online or whatever, and it's kind of our job to make those calls and do directed journalism maybe to make sure that things get done, and that's why they hired us in the first place. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and I would imagine there has to be some point where people just standing around is people just standing around. I mean, you have to put something together, because I know I talk to brides all the time in these consultations, and and they're like, well, I just want it to look really natural and kind of chill. And you're like, yeah, you do, but you don't want someone just like just standing there like picking their nose or something. I mean, you want it to be something that looks nice.
Yep. I think it's the same thing as like a graphic designer, where you have to understand a person that doesn't know anything about art and how to kind of translate it into art. Like, I want it to look like this or whatever, and then they have to come up with a logo from a lawyer. Like they're not going to know typefaces and stuff like that. Same thing with photography. When people say, if you just get pictures of us, candids talking to guests or whatever, no one talks pretty. No one has a flattering angle while they're talking. So you kind of have to translate what that means. It's like, oh, so you don't want to like have your shoulders squared to the camera looking at me dead face or whatever. Okay. That's kind of what they're getting at, and just you have to set this scene and put them in a position where they're comfortable, make them laugh, do something dumb, whatever the case may be. Don't make it about yourself, but something that they know, one, you're not going to judge them, but then two, like they're going to have fun and doing whatever they want to do.
That's very true, because what's the first thing someone does when they look at a photograph? They look at themselves.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, they look right at themselves. I mean, everyone does it, right? I mean, I do it all the time. Like, where am I? Oh, okay, there I am. And then you're looking at everybody else, right? And then you're judging yourself, in that photograph. I mean, people do it. So let's go back to your college days a little bit. I mean, what did you major in?
I started with visual communications, so graphic design.
Right.
I did a little bit in high school. Once I got to college, though, I realized how terrible I was. Like, I mean, real bad. And I'm grateful for getting that exposed right away. So then I went into actually video a little bit. Stunk at that too. I took one photography class and I got a C-. To be fair, I'm a huge procrastinator. In college, I didn't do anything, and it was film, so it was like, oh, I have a project due in 3 hours. I better run around campus and take pictures. So after that, changed my major to communication arts, just interdisciplinary, which is Latin for just graduate and get out. And actually, that was when I learned how to learn, actually. My junior year of college was the first time I figured out anything, and it was like the best time ever. Communication theories, all that stuff. I geek out all day.
Just graduate and get out. I love it. I'm going to use that for my kids when they go to
phrase.
school.
It's a Latin
I'm
phrase.
paying for it. Just graduate and get out.
It's seriously, anything can fit in that major. That's
right.
why I chose it.
Right.
True story.
Where did you go?
Judson,
Okay.
University out in Elgin.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
And now, so tell me a little bit about, working on weddings. I've heard a little rumor about you that from another colleague of mine, that you have this trick that you do where you throw your camera in the air and take some shots. So let's talk a little bit about that. Did you really throw your camera in the air?
Well, it started, it was my, I think probably second or third wedding. I was so, again, my self-worth was attached to getting every single shot of every moment ever happening. And on the dance floor, there was a huge circle of people surrounding the bride and groom, and I was in panic mode because I was on the outside. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's no way of getting in there when there's 5-6 rows deep of people. It was a small dance floor, so it was deep of people.
A horror dance can be like that.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I really was like, well, I don't have a good shot. I might as well be stupid about it, and just put your camera on a timer and throw up a little prayer. The first few times was definitely 1 out of 10 would maybe work. But, after practicing a little bit and, not being the least athletically capable person, I at least can understand how to throw a camera in the air and angle it down. It's really just so people see that you're all about having fun. It really...
they have monopods.
That's stupid, though. Who wants safety? That's playing it safe. Then people on the floor all right, well, the photographer's willing to do something stupid. I better do something stupid. Then I get even crazier shots of people being nuts.
All right. So... Now, like I said, we have industry professionals and also brides and grooms who listen to the show. For couples that are out there that are looking for photographers, and let's face it, weddings bring upon a stress that, and I talk about this a little bit on the show every once in a while, they just naturally bring upon a stress that people don't usually have to go through. You're asking regular people who do not do event planning to all of a sudden have to do event planning. And I think that, a big part of this industry is understanding that. I've seen companies, we've been around for 10 years, I've seen companies come and go because they cannot get their heads wrapped around that.
Right.
They just can't handle it. When someone out there, because this is a nationwide podcast, so, they may not be in the area, but when someone's looking for a photographer, based on your experience, what is the number one thing, maybe the top 3 things they really should be looking for?
Oh, man. If you're looking for a certain style, make sure that it's a consistent across their board. Sometimes you get a lucky shot or a lucky wedding or everything was perfect that day, but then everything else is garbage. So seeing more of a consistent, just yep, I can do this time and time again. You throw anything at me, I'm going to make it happen. And then also it goes right into experience too, where you have a photographer that's been around the block a little bit. If it rains, you know exactly what to do. Timing wise, someone that's on top of things, because I think photographers are the one that's pretty much in charge of everything, pushing the pace or slowing the pace down, really. And it really does then come to even personality with reading people. I can't stress enough how important it is to do engagement sessions just because you're familiar with the bride and groom early on. And I get to know how us 3 work. And then also knowing what poses are comfortable. And in case things get stressed out, I see the bride's shoulders going up and she's getting tense. I'll remember from an engagement session the favorite pose that she did. Maybe it's behind the guy and putting her arms up kind of double underhooks or whatever. That just calms her down. We're good to go. 10 seconds, get that pose, and we'll move on. And then you can just see a totally different person the rest of the day.
It's a great point in the engagement sessions.
Yeah,
it really is. I didn't even think of that.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my biggest reasons.
So those things where I feel like this is why I love doing these interviews, because I feel like you feel like you know a lot since I've been doing this forever, and you've seen everything. But that is one thing I didn't even consider, is that the engagement session is more of almost like a warm up for the day, and just sort of how you guys are going to work together. So with that said, I got to ask you, have you done an engagement session where you've been I don't know how this is going to go on the day of?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it's actually been interesting. It was a pleasant surprise. every time that I've questioned after the engagement session, honestly, it usually is the guy where, most of the guys just don't want to be a part of it, and like, they feel like they're being full of themselves or whatever the case may be, and I totally get that. And so it really does then get me on my A game even more so to like, how can I make this even more fun, enjoyable, and really be efficient with time? Because I know they don't want to spend 6 hours taking pictures and all that crap. It's like, so it just, okay, how can I like get from position to position as fast as possible, get them all these different things without taking more than an hour maybe? So it like kind of puts me in like that go mode even more so than if like the couple is great on the engagement session, then you can just cruise through everything and you're gonna have fun regardless.
Do you find that you talked about experience a little bit, and I also agree that is so key, which is tricky too, because I know that for on the occasions where I've had to hire out, I have people who apply in who are like, hey, I've done all this work, but I've worked with studios where I just can't I can't display it. And I'm like, well, I can't hire you because I have absolutely no idea what your stuff looks like, And it's a shame, really, because I'm sure there are some really good people out there that I just, for whatever reason, the studios they've worked for just don't let them display anything. But I think that experience is so important. And do you find that you kind of get into like a schedule, almost like not schedule, but sort of like a routine throughout your day? And I don't want to say that like in a dry way, but just in a consistency where you have like that baseline, and then you can work around that. Yeah,
it opens you up for freedom then. And it's like how I, going through poses and stuff like that. There's kind of standard, obviously some just nice ones, full length, and make sure you got all the basics that people will want in albums, prints, or whatever. And then from there, that's like, okay, we have extra time. It's gravy. Let's get crazy. And some of that stuff turns out to be some of my favorite, or the covers of books and stuff like that. So it gives you that bigger safety net to know that once you've handled the important stuff or the main things, so you have that routine down, it just frees you up even more so than most people think.
Let's go to the flip side of that. I mean, we're talking about all the great and positive experiences, but you've been around a little while, and let's face it, we have a lot of clients. It's not always peaches and cream. So what happens once in a while when you get the occasional client that comes back and you're like, oh, look at these great, and they come back with a totally different view on what they received? How do you handle that? I mean, how do you, or how would you handle that, or how do you handle that when something like that pops up?
As far as if they don't like the pictures, or
maybe they're not as enthusiastic as you are about what you've turned in, because it happens. I mean,
maybe for some people,
it's true, but it does, but it can happen, and at some point it probably will. I mean, even if you haven't had that experience yet, if you're new to the industry, the longer you're in the industry, the longer you have to work with people. There's going to be a point that comes up at some point where someone's just going to sit there and have a disagreement with you.
Definitely.
How do you handle that?
The times that I've had it has been in the engagement sessions, thankfully. Because it's great when you can work with them. Like, okay, I love to know then why, like the feeling, or let's talk about the ones you do actually like, and kind of compare and contrast to the ones you don't like. So then I can kind of figure out, and again, it's like translating all over again, where like the feel of the picture maybe is a big important thing that they just can't put their finger on. It's definitely a puzzle to kind of piece together the things that, like, is it her hair, is it her eyes, is it her mouth, like what is it that they like about it or they don't like about it. It gets real tricky too with like your self-worth kind of deal, like when people view them, it's like you hear yourself in a voicemail and you hear your voice and you're like, oh, it's like the same thing with pictures where like it's the crashing reality of like this is really who they are. And some people, like, it's tough to not get into like Mr. Counselor mode and say like, look, you're pretty freaking awesome. I'm sorry that you don't see that. And, like, you have to almost draw a line of, like, staying positive but not fake positive. And that comes with the consultation, I think. Gaining their trust early on, that you're going to be honest with them. Like, I've told them straight up with things, like if it's going to be distracting to wear certain things or not or whatever. So that when you do tell them, like, look, these are awesome. And, like, I'll tell you straight up if something is awkward, I'll delete it first of all. But, like, I think that's really what's important. And so, like, same thing with, like, people ask if I get bridezillas. Like, I haven't had a person that's been really disappointed in their pictures either, where you manage the expectations early on. That saves you a whole list of issues later then.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Yeah, I know, like, in our consultations, I'm flat out like, hey, there is room for revisions, or there are room for revisions. I mean, because they, and I just look, there may be a point where I submit the films to you, you come back and say, yeah, I like them, but I want to have a couple things switched around, and you have the opportunity to do that.
Sure.
I think that, I didn't. And I'd be honest with you, there was a point in time when I didn't do that, and people would get their stuff, and every once in a while I'd get someone come back and they'd be like, oh, they'd be all, but knowing that, okay, well, I can make some changes, and having the flexibility to do so, took that whole anxiety piece out of the equation.
Totally.
And I think and I think you made a good point, because I was listening to an interview with an author the other day who had written about a subject who had read the book, and he told the subject, he said, this is gonna be like when you first heard yourself on a recording. It's gonna be you're seeing yourself from a different angle, and you might not be happy with what you see. And I'll never forget, I worked with a photographer once who's excellent, and he turned around and he showed the bride the photo. This is something that he always did. And he turned around, he showed the bride the photo, and the bride would always go, oh, that's amazing, and it was like and he was like, oh yeah. So, right. But he did it on this shoot, and the bride didn't like herself. And she got all like completely tense and completely, and it affected really the rest of the day.
Wow.
And it was an interesting thing because, like I said, the guy does it all the time, and I was like, oh, and so, but you could see where, and it was a great photo, great shot. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the consistency, like you said, it was like everything else that he had done, but for whatever reason, she just didn't like herself. Yeah. And I could tell you, we did the film for that, and it was the same way with the film. It was like, we got it to a point where she loved it, but it was a bit of a struggle. It was a bit of a thing where, it was the same kind of thing. She just didn't feel comfortable, I think, looking at herself, and from certain angles as well. So, what's next for you? Clearly you're busy. You're working a lot. What is it? What are you working on now? That you're just getting ready for the season, or are you?
A lot of this time of year. So this is, I don't know if you want to even mention when this is happening.
Go for it.
This is the winter time. So
it is the winter time.
It's so great. I love it. I have probably a 4-month gap of no weddings. And it's great when I do more corporate stuff. I do a lot of corporate events.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you feel so? And this is a good thing to talk about with photographers. What do you do when you're not doing weddings?
Right. Yeah, corporate events is one of my favorite because it's kind of like a wedding, but just not the whole ceremony part. There's some speeches usually, but the corporate parties that they're dancing and they're having fun. So it's kind of like that to keep you on your toes a little bit. And they're super fun people. Like, they're just nuts. Doing headshots, 10 or 15 a week or so. Family shoots still. In the wintertime, sometimes it's greater in their house. And there's always just some projects. This is when I push off, like if there's charity work and stuff like that, I'll try to fly out to the DR to go with Go Ministries and, Crossfire Cigars that are out there. It's just a blast.
Ministries and Cigars.
Yep.
I love it.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Well,
that's great.
People in the DR, when you touch a tobacco leaf, you're considered the lowest of the class, so the Go Ministries comes in to help them get into like public places that they're not allowed in. They're like literally considered lepers. So I'm going out there all the time just to do documentary work. I try not to, and honestly, Eric O'Connor put it the best way ever. We're like, some people use and abuse ministries to further their business, and what he said, it just blew me away. He's like, I use my business to further any kind of charity work or anything like that.
Right.
That I
For
do.
our listeners who are not familiar, Eric O'Connor is a photographer that we both know.
Yeah.
And I think you worked with him for a little bit, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just love his view on it. And it's I couldn't put it on like why I didn't want to blog when I went to like the Philippines and all these places. Like, I didn't even want to put it on my website. Like, I wanted the message across, but I didn't want to make it look like, hey, look at me with these great pictures of like googly-eyed kids that are looking up, and then like, of course it'll pull your heartstring. But he said it the best way. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to use my business to further charities and ministries and stuff like that instead of the other way around.
That's really awesome that you do that kind of work. That's something that I think we could all do a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's easy. It's so easy to get wrapped up in everything you have to do in a day, and especially when you're constantly busy and you're working a lot, which is always a blessing in itself. To be busy and working, but at the same time, it's easy to just. Like I always say, this is kind of like my social hour, because for me, I don't have too much time to go out and do anything beyond that, and it's, but it is one of those things where, being able to take that time to volunteer on projects that you care about and are deep, to you, and even more so affect other people and help them in ways that otherwise they cannot be, I think is very important.
Oh, absolutely.
It's pretty amazing that you're able to do that.
It helps to kind of get over yourself a little bit once you're doing those and you see like a kind of a different perspective. It's not like the whole like, wow, they have a terrible, I'm okay, but it's just like stop thinking about yourself the whole time and just go out there and do something.
For sure. One thing I did want to ask you about is your editing process, because I just got done interviewing a DJ who we both know, and one of the things I sort of envy about DJs is they can just do the job and go home. They don't have to, they don't have to do anything afterwards. But how do you handle your editing process? Do you have a flow that you go with? Do you do you find that it takes up? How much time does it take you to kind of put all that together?
2-3 hours maybe from
Yeah.
a wedding. I have an editing company,
Right.
which is super helpful. All it is for me is like go through the pictures and pick the ones that will get processed. Send it to the company, comes back in a few days. Then I just go through it, make sure that they did a good job. They have all the same presets that I have in Lightroom. And I mean, it might as well have been done by me, but they're better and they're faster.
Yeah, and I think that's important to know too. I mean, I think there are certain areas that we are good at, and there are certain areas where we can let other people do because they're probably just a little bit better. And I think that's important to know as someone who works in the industry, that you may not be good at all things, and there are people better than you that are out there that are doing it, and so you might want to rely upon them. And in that combination, now you have the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. It's hard when you're by yourself. You want to hold on to everything, control or even money. It's hard to see the value up front. If I spend $300 a month on editing, that then means, though, because I'm not spending 12 to 15 hours, I could book other shoots and stuff like that and have a total mental capacity. I have the margin where I can bring in, $500, $800, $1,200 a shoot that more than pays for itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to free yourself up like that.
And I think that's interesting for industry professionals who listen to the show, because so many people are tied into it has to be me. It has to be me. I have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was one of those. I forget. It was like Montgomery Ward or J.C. Penney. I forget who it was. One of the guys who ran one of those department stores said, the number one thing that he did that increased his business was take himself out of the equation. Or to an extent.
Yep.
Because he knew there were other people out there who could do it better than he can. And editing, certainly. I mean, it's one of those things that's so time consuming, especially, as you know, with video too.
Video editing is so much worse. You can't have audio or anything. Like, I'll at least have Netflix going or something like that and just stare at faces.
Right.
Man, you got every sense like on that screen.
Yeah.
You're locked in. That terrifies me.
Definitely. So corporate work coming up during the winter time. We got some. Do you have ministry work coming up then?
Yeah. Hopefully
Okay.
I'll be out in February, March, something like that. I'll fly out there when they're not too busy yet because they have like baseball camps and stuff in the summertime.
Yeah.
So I'll be out there to just interview people and kind of just document the workers out there. And because no one really knows how crazy it is out there. Like the stories, like they're not allowed in like churches or hospitals or schools or anything like that. That's public. So Go Ministry goes in there to either build some or works on that transition to get them in there. So I just want to have it out there.
It's pretty amazing. And then we're off to the summertime. It's going to be here before we know it, right?
I'm so excited.
Doesn't it feel like the months just whip by
Dude.
in this industry?
Each year, man, I feel like I blink and it's just like melting away already. Like, oh, I guess we're going to shoot now.
Yeah, we're back to the summertime.
Yeah.
So Robb Davidson, where can people find you online?
I have all sorts of stuff to litter the internet. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
What's your web address?
Website is rob-davidson.com. If you know of the robbdavidson.com, he's a musical engineer and he won't sell his site. So if you can harass him, that'd be great. I've been trying every year.
Robb Davidson. Thank
With
you so much.
2 Bs.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, man. Great to be here.
Well, that's going to do it for Wedding Pro Weekly. Also, don't forget to love us on SoundCloud, like us on Facebook, and review us on iTunes. For Wedding Pro Weekly, I'm Jason Groh. We'll see you next time.